Alex wants to learn how to alternate pick fast, and not only pick, but actually play clean and synchronize. So that's a good start that you added the clean and synchronize, because that's the biggest issue I see with people trying to pick fast. And the way to get there is to really focus on solid repetitions when you practice. It's fine to push it a bit and play a bit sloppy when you just play for fun or improvise, but when you do practice, you want to really focus on having everything as perfect as possible, because that's the way to build the habits. You need a lot of repetition to really build that connection, so it's just second nature. And I would focus a lot on single string picking at first, and then start delving into 1 note per string, 2 note per string, 3 note per string, and so on. Kind of hard to do everything here, but check out my Patreon as well. Andy asks on Facebook, do you have any tips on fretboard memorization? Yes. The way that I view the fretboard and the way that I teach it is through what I call triangulations, and I call it that because it's 3 notes, mainly the 3 roots of whatever key you're in. Since I use solfege to connect it with my ear, that would be the do of whatever particular key I'm in, and I divide a fretboard into 5 different octave patterns like this. And in each of these octave patterns, I'm able to see all the intervals around any of the root notes. So if I'm here, for example, I can see it. I have a 5th here, the flat 6th, 4th, the natural 7th, and so on. And also connect that to my ear training, so I can both hear and find the notes in any key. And since it's based on how the guitar is structured, it doesn't really matter what key I'm in, because the intervals will stay in the same place. What's the difference in brain function between writing a solo and improvising? It seems that improvising is more a free procedure instead of writing a solo where brain works in terms of licks and standard phrases. It's like playing a Tetris game. Well, I'm not a neuroscientist, but so in terms of brain function, I can't really tell you. But I've heard it described as composing or improvising is like composing in real time. And I think that's true, but also depending on the tempo, the higher the tempo, I think most improvisers will rely on not necessarily pre-planned phrases, but phrases that they're comfortable with. It's more like words, and instead of like finding the individual letters and putting them together into words. So they have more like standard phrases that fits the style they're playing. And for composing, you can really take your time and listen and find the perfect phrase. Daniel Buck asks how to apply the modes to his playing. Well, I think first off, you need to make sure that you really understand the modes. And the best way to learn the modes is to learn it from the same root notes. So for example, if we're in E here, just play the low E string here, and then I would suggest learning it from the brightest mode to the darkest. And the way that I do it, I do the Lydian first, then major, then Mixolydian, then going into Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian, and finally Locrian. Because doing it that way, you only change 1 note at a time. So you go progressively darker, and you can also turn around and go progressively lighter as well. Once you know that, and you can you know where to find the sounds on the guitar, and you know how it works, I would just find any type of modal example I can from my favorite artists. So you get a lot of Lydian stuff from Satriani and Vai, for example. Flying in a Blue Dream is a really good example of Lydian. You get a lot of Phrygian stuff from Yngwie, and it just goes on and on like that. And that's the basic approach I take to learning anything, whether it's working on my orchestral stuff or the guitar stuff. I just go to my favorite sounds, and I can read from a pop song, orchestral piece, whatever, and then learn that sound so I can understand it to the point where I can recreate it, and then I can add that to my musical toolbox. So try that approach. Daniel's second question is about right and left hand synchronization. And to develop that, I highly suggest that you use a metronome. And the reason for that is because it's all dependent upon your left and right hand playing exactly the same rhythm. And having a metronome will really help you out because you have a place where these two can sync up. And then once you have that, find a really comfortable tempo, meaning a tempo where you're 100% sure you're playing perfectly in sync with the metronome, and also doing that while getting the tone that you want and also being super relaxed. And then just repeat that over and over and over again. So I'm not really pushing the tempo with the metronome. That has never worked for me. I see this like learning to tie your shoelaces faster. You didn't sit with a metronome and push yourself to do that, hopefully. It would be really weird. Instead, you just did it correctly over and over and over and over again, and then eventually you could just do it faster without thinking about it. Jay asks on Facebook, what's the best way to practice bends, especially if you're using multiple guitars so the string gauge and tension varies? Well, as far as practice, I would just, hit one note like that and then bend up to it, either from a half step down or a whole step down. And then really listen, of course, because no one likes to hear, bad bends, like the worst thing ever. And you can go further down if you want. So, but that's up to you. But when it comes to the different tension, I use 10s on all my guitars, but playing on my Solar feels different from playing on my Fender and all that stuff. And even the 3 different Solars that I have, they feel kind of different. So you just need to practice on all guitars, basically.